Hello, Mr. Cooke.
Hi, Simon.
Thank you very much for your time. Intriguing film, really interesting slice of history. What I was looking at was Tom O'Connor, the screenwriter for it. He has previously said there was a heck of a lot of misinformation had been put out by both sides, by both the UK and Russia. Wondering what you found, what elements you found to be untrue, and what you found that you didn't put in the film as well.
Well, I mean, from the Soviet side, that's sort of easier to define because, I mean, with Britain, Britain and the US, it was more about withholding information rather than telling falsehoods. Whereas what happened in the Soviet situation was actually quite fascinating because unlike in Britain, Greville Wynne was a sort of nobody. No one knew who he was. And that's one of the reasons why they wanted to use him as their courier, that he was sort of legitimate regular person traveling to the Eastern Bloc with a legitimate cover and a legitimate reason to be there, whereas Penkovsky was actually quite famous. I mean, the Soviet system made public figures out of its military heroes, and he was a military hero. He was decorated 13 times. He was very sort of instrumental in keeping the Nazis out of Kiev, which was an important point of shift in the Second World War. It was a really important sort of ground, and he was very well known, and he was a huge embarrassment when it got out that he'd done this, because he had given 5,000 secrets to the West, and he was the highest ranking Soviet spy in the whole history of the Cold War. And of course, it was very embarrassing for the Soviets that someone at that level would betray them. And so they had to really go into overdrive to discredit him and to make out that they had been on it all along. And they staged a whole load of photographs of surveillance, making out that they'd done that before they'd arrested him. In fact, they were staged after he was arrested. And they had a show trial where they gave Wynne and Penkovsky a script of their answers. And they had to actually, in Wynne's case, they had to sort of slightly rebuild the courtroom because he turned up the night before, and they gave him the script. It's like, I can't really learn the lines for this overnight. This is like 50 pages. I'm gonna have to read from it, and if I read from it, they'll see that I'm reading because it was on television. And they built a sort of big witness box to hide the fact he was reading. So it was a really important political moment for them. It was successful what they did, because they then made a documentary. They made 2 documentaries about Penkovsky, which said that he wasn't really in Kiev, that he was in an office, that he pretended to be injured during the war, that he was a coward, that he was a sort of philanderer and all this stuff. And they needed to do that to sort of protect their own positions. Eventually the truth in terms of the West came out, because in the 90s, CIA released all the papers, so you could actually work out what had really happened. From their point of view, we still don't have access to any of the Soviet papers.
So, although both protagonists, both Greville Wynne and Oleg Penkovsky, no longer around, did you have much consultation with the family, or what did they think of the film?
We couldn't find any of them. I don't know where any of them are. We looked. I think his son may be still alive, but we couldn't find them. In terms of Penkovsky's family, his daughters are still alive and living in Moscow. In fact, they're quite sort of well-known figures. But we didn't have access to them, and it was quite hard in Russia to sort of get access, because he's still considered to be a traitor. So people were reluctant. Some people were really annoyed that we're telling the story and sort of making out he's a hero. But no, we weren't able to find people, and in fact, we really tried. I mean, it'd be great if we met or heard from family members while we're doing this. I did, when the film went out in America, I got contacted by someone who was a good friend of Greville's and had in fact been with him the very day that he got arrested, who was someone who was working for the British Embassy, and got to know him through bringing him in and out. And she was very fond of him. I mean, I think he was a complicated guy and not everyone loved him. I think after he got back, he was quite damaged by what happened to him. You know, I've heard stories of him that people found him quite tricky, but this woman said he was a joy and was very, very fond of him. So that's the only direct contact I've had with anyone who really knew him.
So Benedict Cumberbatch, you've worked with Benedict a fair bit over the years, and you have that working relationship. But there are moments, or there is a particular scene in this where effectively he is humiliated. His head is shaved. He's ordered to strip. Those can't be easy scenes to film, and I wonder how you go about doing that.
Interestingly, paradoxically for him, they're the scenes he likes most. Anything really crazy and extreme, he loves doing. And he was in his element, actually. He was so brilliant. And especially those first couple of days in that prison, and it was the conditions were quite tough. It's a real prison. It was a prison for religious dissidents it was outside Prague. It was about an hour away from Prague. And it was December, and it was -29. And there's no light or heating in there. It was all sort of, we had to put our own systems in. But he sort of loved that because it gave him something really tough and really challenging to play, and he embraced it. And in fact, that very first entrance into the prison, we filmed without him ever having been in there. So the first take we did, it was live. He said, I don't want to go in until I'm on camera. So we rehearsed it with a double. He was blindfolded when he's brought in, and he did it. He saw the place for the first time for real, because he just wanted to sort of go into that extreme place. So he was extraordinary. And there was also one day, he's sort of naked running around this cell. I can't really communicate what the cold was like. It's sort of he actually got ill in the end from doing it, but that sort of really extreme side of a character he heads towards with great courage. He so loves it. He loses himself in it, and he's brilliant at that.
I understand it was Benedict who had brought the project to you. I wondered how, is that right? And
no,
so,
no, it was the other way. It was the other way. I got the project through my agent in the US. So it was optioned by a guy called Ben Pugh in 42 films. And he got hold of the script from Tom O'Connor. And Tom had written it on spec. Because he thought the story was amazing. And then I was sort of halfway through reading it. I thought, this is so brilliant for Benedict. It's so perfect. I went in with it, and it just sort of turned out, it was sort of very fortuitous. It sort of turned out that he was free. He really liked it. And then he brought his company on board. So they became sort of part of the producing structure of the film.
So finally then, we always ask directors this. You have some years between your films. We like to know from directors, what is the project that you've turned down that in retrospect you wish you hadn't turned down?
Oh God, I don't tend to do that very often. I mean, I do turn things down, but I never really look back. I'm trying to think about that. A really hard one. I tell you what, I was involved in the early, there is one thing. I was involved in the early development of the film that became Wild Rose, which is a film with Jessie Buckley, a beautiful independent film. And I couldn't do it because it clashed with something else, and I had to let it go. And I thought that was such a great script. I loved it. And I thought that, I thought Nicole Taylor, who wrote it, is just a very fine writer. However, when I saw it, I thought I couldn't have done better than that. I actually thought it was a wonderful film, a sort of underrated film. I think it's a really beautifully directed and made film. So that's one, yeah. I mean, I you know what? I do say no to things, but if I say no to something, I sort of really feel it's not in me. And I haven't had that experience yet. I haven't done the old, Decca with the Beatles, letting the Beatles go. So I haven't done that yet.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, Dominic. It's a really interesting film. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.